Zane had always considered himself a daring man. As a space engineer, he often found himself in the most dangerous situations, his sharp wit and confident attitude pulling him through every challenge. But today was different. Today, he found himself in an unknown part of the galaxy, lost in a bustling marketplace on a distant planet. It was a place he had never planned to visit, yet here he was, surrounded by strange alien beings and bizarre, floating machines. He was trying to navigate through the crowded streets when a sudden jolt from behind knocked him off balance. Turning around, Zane saw an alien merchant apologizing profusely, offering him strange, glowing fruit. With a chuckle, Zane waved it off and continued walking, scanning the crowd. The energy in the air was thick, a mixture of excitement and tension. The planet, known as Valkera, was a hub for intergalactic trade, but there was something more mysterious about it. And it was that mystery that had brought Zane here. It wasn't long before his attention was drawn to a group of regal-looking individuals at the center of the marketplace. They were tall, draped in dark cloaks that shimmered like shadows. Zane couldn't help but notice that everyone around them was giving them space-wide, respectful space. Among them stood a figure that caught Zane's attention immediately. She was a woman, tall, beautiful, and undeniably commanding. Her skin shimmered in the light, almost as if it was made of the night sky itself, dark and captivating. Her crimson eyes seemed to glow with power, a power that made Zane feel strangely nervous. Her presence alone caused the air around her to crackle, and she seemed to command not only respect but also fear. Zane couldn't help himself. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips as he took a step closer. This was the moment the woman was the one everyone avoided, the one everyone whispered about. She was Serafina, the vampire queen of Valkera. Her reputation had spread across the galaxy, tales of her beauty, her power, and the darkness she carried with her wherever she went. But Zane wasn't one to cower. No, he liked to test the limits, to see how far he could push before things got too dangerous. He walked towards her, his boots tapping softly against the stone streets. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, the world around him seemed to pause. He could feel the weight of her gaze, cold and knowing, as if she could see into his very soul. Zane, always the joker, couldn't help but tease. With a confident grin, he leaned in just enough for her to hear. "You're a long way from home, Your Majesty," he said, his voice a mix of humor and challenge. Serafina didn't flinch. Her eyes remained fixed on him, never wavering. A small smile tugged at her lips, sharp and knowing. She took a step forward, closing the gap between them, and Zane felt his heart race in an instant. Despite his bravado, there was something about her that made him nervous, something he couldn't quite place. "I like your boldness, human," she said, her voice a smooth melody that seemed to resonate in his chest. "But you should be careful who you tease." Zane didn't back down, even as he felt the weight of her words. "I've always been careful," he said, his smirk widening. "But I'm not afraid of a little danger." At this, Serafina's smile grew, her eyes gleaming with an intensity that sent a chill through him. She stepped closer, her lips barely inches from his ear. "Then you shall have me," she whispered, her voice soft but with an undertone of something far more dangerous. Zane froze for a moment, unsure if he had heard her correctly. Had he pushed her too far? Was this a warning or an invitation? Before he could gather his thoughts, Serafina stepped back, the moment passing as quickly as it had come. She tilted her head, her smile still present, but her eyes were unreadable. "You have made your choice, human," she said, her voice calm and almost playful. "Now, you must deal with the consequences." Zane stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of what had just happened. His heart was still pounding, and his mind was racing. He had no idea what he had just gotten himself into, but there was one thing he knew for sure: he had made an impression. And somehow, he had a feeling that this encounter would change the course of his life forever. As Serafina turned away, her dark cloak billowing behind her like a shadow, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped into a game far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. And yet, despite the danger, a part of him couldn't wait to see what would happen next. He was, after all, no stranger to the thrill of the unknown. Zane stood in the middle of the crowded market, the words Serafina had whispered to him still ringing in his ears. "Then you shall have me." His heart raced, both with excitement and a hint of fear. What had she meant by that? Was she joking, or was there something more behind her words? He had never met anyone like her before, and he wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a dangerous one. He turned to look around, trying to shake off the strange feeling in his chest. The marketplace was still as busy as ever, but it felt like a different place now. He couldn't get Serafina out of his mind. There was something about her that was impossible to ignore. Her power, her beauty, and her presence seemed to control everything around her. And somehow, she had taken an interest in him, a human. Zane was used to attention, but this was different. This was a kind of attention he didn't know how to handle. After what felt like an eternity, Zane decided he needed answers. He couldn't just let her words hang in the air without understanding them. He had to find her again, to see if she truly meant what she had said. Zane made his way through the winding streets of the city, asking around until he finally found himself standing outside a massive, dark building at the center of the city. It was as if the entire place had been built to reflect her power. The walls were high and made of dark stone, with strange symbols carved into them. The air around it felt thick, heavy with the weight of centuries of history. This was no ordinary palace, it was a place of mystery, and Zane couldn't help but feel both intrigued and nervous. A tall figure in a black cloak appeared at the entrance and gave him a long, appraising look. "You seek the Vampire Queen?" the figure asked, voice low and distant. Zane nodded, his heart racing. "Yes. I spoke with her earlier. I need to speak with her again." The figure didn't say another word, only stepped aside, allowing Zane to enter. As he walked through the grand halls, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The walls were adorned with strange, glowing artifacts and ancient paintings. Everything seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. It was both beautiful and intimidating. Finally, he arrived at a large set of doors, made from dark wood that seemed almost alive with an eerie energy. The figure who had escorted him knocked softly, and the doors swung open without a sound. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the only light coming from a fire burning in the center. And there she was, Serafina. She stood by the fire, her back to him, her long hair flowing like liquid night. Zane could feel the power radiating off her, even from across the room. She had not turned to face him, but he could tell she was aware of his presence. There was something captivating about her, something that pulled him in, even though he knew it was dangerous. "I see you've come," she said, her voice smooth and cold, but with a hint of amusement. "You cannot stay away, can you?" Zane swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to make a scene earlier, but I couldn't leave without knowing what you meant by your words. You said, 'Then you shall have me.' What does that mean?" Serafina slowly turned to face him, her crimson eyes locking onto his. Her smile was slow and deliberate, as if she enjoyed watching him squirm. She walked toward him, each step echoing in the quiet room. "What it means," she said softly, "is that I see something in you. Something different. You are bold, human. And you are not afraid. I find that fascinating." Zane could feel his heart racing again, but this time it wasn't just from fear. There was a strange pull in the air, something magnetic between them. He had never met anyone like her, so powerful, so beautiful, and so dangerous. "Why me?" Zane asked, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. "Why would someone like you be interested in someone like me?" Serafina stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. I've ruled for centuries, Zane. I've seen many things, but never someone like you. You have a fire in you that I want to see burn brighter. Her voice was like a whisper, but it sent chills down his spine. Zane stood his ground, though his mind raced. And what exactly do you want from me? He couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a passing interest. Her smile widened, but there was a coldness to it. I want you to prove yourself. To show me that you are worthy of what I offer. Zane frowned, trying to understand. What is it you offer? Serafina's eyes gleamed, and for a moment, Zane could see something ancient and powerful flicker behind them. I offer you power, Zane. The kind of power you've never dreamed of. I offer you a place beside me, in my world. But you must earn it. Nothing comes for free. Zane hesitated for a moment, his mind spinning. Power? A place beside her? He was a human, what could he possibly offer her? But there was something in her gaze that made him feel like he was already a part of something much bigger than himself. I'm ready, he said, his voice firm. I'll prove myself. I won't back down. Serafina's smile deepened, and for the first time, Zane saw something almost playful in her eyes. Then let the games begin, she said softly, her voice sending a thrill through him. Zane didn't know what to expect next. He had agreed to prove himself to Serafina, but the question was, what did she want him to do? The Vampire Queen's words still echoed in his mind, haunting him with their mystery. Let the games begin. What kind of tests would he face? And more importantly, why was she so interested in him? He was just a human. Yet, there was a part of him that couldn't back down. He couldn't resist the pull of her presence. For the next few days, Zane stayed in the palace, waiting for his next challenge. Serafina had not spoken much to him since their meeting, and the silence made him uneasy. He spent his time exploring the grand palace, its towering walls filled with strange artifacts, dark paintings, and sculptures that seemed to watch him wherever he went. The place was both beautiful and foreboding, a reflection of its ruler. One morning, as Zane sat in a large, dimly lit room, pondering what he had gotten himself into, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Are you ready, human? Zane turned to see Serafina standing in the doorway. She looked as stunning as ever, her crimson eyes glowing softly in the low light. There was an air of confidence about her, something that made it clear she was in control of everything around her. But there was something else in her gaze, something that made Zane feel both nervous and curious. I'm ready, he said, standing up from where he had been sitting. His voice was steady, though his heart raced. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he wasn't going to back down. Not now. Serafina's lips curled into a small smile, and she stepped forward, her movement graceful, almost like she was gliding across the floor. Follow me, she said, her voice soft but commanding. Zane followed her through the palace, his footsteps echoing in the silent halls. They passed through corridors filled with strange symbols, their meaning unknown to him. The air around them grew colder as they descended into the lower levels of the palace, and Zane couldn't help but shiver slightly. There was something ancient about this place, something that made him feel like an outsider, even though he had been living here for days. Finally, they reached a large, circular chamber. The room was dimly lit by flickering torches, casting long shadows on the stone walls. At the center of the room stood a massive, ancient-looking stone pedestal, covered in strange carvings. It looked like some kind of altar, and the atmosphere in the room felt heavy, almost oppressive. Zane's eyes widened as he looked around. What is this place? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Serafina's eyes gleamed as she looked at him. This is where you will prove your worth, she said simply. Here, you will face your first test. Zane swallowed hard, his mind racing. And what exactly do I have to do? Serafina didn't answer right away. Instead, She walked to the pedestal and placed her hand on it. As soon as her fingers touched the stone, the room seemed to shift. The air grew even colder, and a strange, humming sound filled the space. Zane looked around, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what was happening, but something told him he was about to face something that would change everything. This test, Serafina said, her voice suddenly serious, will test your willpower. You will face a vision, a choice that will challenge your very soul. You must decide who you truly are, and what you are willing to sacrifice to gain what you seek. Zane's mind spun. A vision? What kind of choice? Serafina's eyes darkened, her expression unreadable. That is for you to discover. The vision will show you a path. A path you must choose, but remember, not all paths lead to the same destination. Before Zane could ask more, a strange light began to fill the room. The stone pedestal glowed, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Zane felt a sudden pull, as though something was drawing him forward. He stepped closer to the pedestal, the light intensifying with each step he took. Trust yourself, Serafina's voice echoed in his ears, though she didn't seem to be speaking aloud. And remember, the price of power is always steep. Zane's heart raced, and before he could react, the light engulfed him. Suddenly, he was no longer standing in the room with Serafina. The air around him felt different, as though the world had shifted. He found himself in a vast, dark landscape, the sky above him swirling with dark clouds. The ground was uneven, covered in sharp rocks that seemed to reach up as if trying to grab at his feet. It was a place that felt ancient and forgotten, a place where time itself seemed to stand still. Before him, a figure appeared. It was a woman, but she was different. Her features were twisted, her eyes glowing with a strange, unnatural light. She was beautiful, but in a way that felt wrong, like something was off. The woman spoke, her voice soft but laced with a dark, alluring tone. You have come to the crossroads, human. Choose your path. Zane looked around, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. What do you mean? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. The woman smiled, and the darkness around her seemed to shift. One path leads to power, eternal life, and unimaginable strength. The other leads to death, but the one who dies will be free of all burdens. Zane's mind raced. This was the choice. This was the test. He didn't know what to do. The woman's words echoed in his mind, and for a moment, he felt lost, unsure of which path to choose. But then he remembered Serafina's words. The price of power is always steep. Zane knew what he had to do. Zane's mind spun as he stood in the eerie landscape before him, the figure of the twisted woman still watching him with glowing eyes. His heart pounded in his chest. The choice was clear: power or freedom. But what was the cost of each? And how could he make such an important decision without fully understanding what it meant? The woman's voice broke through his thoughts, sweet and cold. Choose, human. The path to power awaits. But know that nothing comes without a price. Zane stood frozen, his mind wrestling with the impossible decision. Power. Eternal life? That sounded tempting, but what did it truly mean? Would he lose himself? And what about freedom? Death, though, was an even more terrifying thought. I don't know what you want from me, he muttered, his voice almost a whisper. How do I choose? The woman's smile widened, a wicked gleam in her eyes. You have already chosen, without knowing it. The power you seek will consume you. The freedom you desire will set you free. Now, choose what you are truly willing to sacrifice. Zane looked around, his hands trembling at his sides. The ground beneath him shifted, the dark landscape twisting as if to mock his indecision. He had never felt more out of place. The decision before him felt like a weight too heavy to bear, yet there was something pulling at him, urging him to choose the path to power. Was he really ready to face the consequences? But then, as if on cue, the image of Serafina flashed in his mind. Her eyes so full of mystery and power, her voice filled with both promise and danger. She had given him the challenge, and now, it seemed, it was time to prove himself. He couldn't back down. Not now. Zane's heart thudded loudly as the winds around him began to pick up. The darkness surrounding him seemed to grow, suffocating him with its weight. The twisted woman stepped closer, her step slow and deliberate, but Zane stood tall. He had made up his mind. "I choose power," he said, his voice stronger than he felt. "I want to stand by Serafina's side." The woman's face twisted into a strange, satisfied grin. "Very well. You have chosen the path of darkness. But remember, power will take more than just your strength. It will require your very soul." Before Zane could respond, the landscape around him shattered like glass. The dark sky cracked open, and he felt the ground beneath his feet tremble violently. The woman faded into the shadows, and everything went black. When Zane opened his eyes, he was no longer standing in the haunting landscape. He was back in the palace, in the room where Serafina had first spoken to him. His body felt different, stronger, more alive, as though a surge of energy was coursing through him. It was as if the power he had chosen had already begun to change him. Serafina stood in front of him, her crimson eyes scanning him with a calm but knowing look. She took a step closer, and Zane could feel the heat of her presence, a magnetism that pulled him in. "Well done," she said, her voice low and steady. "You have chosen the path to power, just as I knew you would. But now, you must face the consequences of that choice." Zane felt a shiver run through him, but he stood firm. "I'm ready. I'll do whatever it takes to prove myself." Serafina's gaze softened, and for the briefest moment, Zane saw something in her eyes, a flicker of something almost kind. But it disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by the cool, calculating queen he had come to know. "You will need to be," she said softly. "Because the power you now wield is not easily controlled. It will grow stronger, and with it, so will the darkness that comes with it. But if you can master it, you will stand beside me as an equal." Zane's heart raced as he took a step forward. He had chosen this path. He had chosen to stand by Serafina's side, and now, he had to embrace the power he had been given, no matter the cost. He didn't fully understand what lay ahead, but there was no turning back now. "I will control it," Zane said, his voice steady. "I won't let it take over me." Serafina studied him for a moment, her gaze piercing through him as if she were looking for any hint of doubt. After what seemed like an eternity, she nodded. "Very well," she said, her voice low but filled with a quiet power. "Then let us begin." She stepped back and gestured for him to follow. Zane took a deep breath, his body still buzzing with the energy that now flowed within him. As he moved to follow her, he couldn't help but wonder what awaited him. What challenges would he face? And what price would he have to pay for the power he had just embraced? But no matter what came next, he knew one thing for sure: he was no longer the same man who had stepped into this palace. He had made his choice. And now, he was bound to Serafina, a part of her dark world, for better or worse. Zane's body felt like it was on fire. The power coursing through him was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Every nerve in his body tingled, and his senses were heightened to an almost unbearable level. It was as if the entire universe had opened up to him, revealing all its secrets. And yet, with this newfound strength, a dark weight pressed down on his chest, reminding him of the price he would have to pay. He stood in the dimly lit chamber of Serafina's palace, her presence nearby, silent but powerful. She had led him through the corridors of the ancient structure, and now they were in a secluded room, a place where Zane had never been before. The air was thick with the scent of incense and ancient wood, and strange symbols were carved into the walls. It felt as though this room held the answers to questions Zane hadn't even known to ask. Do you feel it? Serafina's voice cut through the silence, low and steady. The power that flows through you. The strength that can change everything. You've made your choice, Zane. But with it comes something you must understand. Zane didn't speak at first. He wasn't sure what to say. His body was still buzzing with energy, his mind racing to process the changes he was undergoing. He could feel the darkness inside him growing, taking root in the depths of his soul. It was as if part of him was slipping away, becoming something else, something more. I feel it, he said finally, his voice hoarse. But I don't understand. What am I supposed to do with all of this? Serafina turned to face him, her crimson eyes glowing in the dim light. She was as beautiful as ever, but there was something colder about her now, something distant. It was as if she were both the queen and the teacher, guiding him through a path he hadn't fully chosen. You must learn to control it, she said, her tone firm. The power you now possess is not something you can wield without consequences. You will face temptations, challenges, and dangers that will test your very soul. But the greatest test, Zane, will be whether you can hold onto yourself. Zane swallowed hard. What do you mean by that? What happens if I can't? Serafina's smile was soft, almost sad. You will lose yourself to the power. You will become nothing more than a vessel for darkness, consumed by the very thing you sought to control. And when that happens, you will no longer be the person you are now. You will be mine. Forever. The words struck Zane like a cold wave. He had chosen this power, but he hadn't truly understood what it would cost. He had thought he could handle it, that he could control it. But now, standing in front of Serafina, he realized that he might have bitten off more than he could chew. I don't want to lose myself, he said, his voice quiet. I don't want to become like that. Serafina stepped closer to him, her eyes searching his face, as though looking for any trace of doubt or fear. You have already made the first step. You have chosen power, Zane. And that power will test you in ways you can't even imagine. But you have one thing that most others don't. Zane frowned, confused. What's that? You have me, she said softly. I will help you. I will guide you, as long as you remain strong enough to follow. Her words were comforting, but they also carried an undercurrent of something darker. Zane couldn't shake the feeling that she was saying these things not just to reassure him, but to remind him of what he stood to lose. He wasn't sure whether that made him feel better or worse. Serafina stepped back, her expression turning serious. You must choose your next steps carefully. The power you've gained is not just for you. There are others out there who will sense it, and they will come for you. They will want what you have, and they will not hesitate to take it from you. Zane's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Who are these people? Others like me, Serafina said, her eyes narrowing slightly. Vampires, rulers, ancient beings who seek to control the galaxy. They won't care about your intentions or your promises. They will see only your power, and they will try to take it. Zane's stomach churned at the thought. He had chosen this path for its strength, its promise of power and security. But now he saw how quickly it could turn into a burden, a dangerous game with no easy way out. What should I do? Zane asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Serafina's gaze softened, and she reached out to place a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was cold, but there was something grounding about it. You must be prepared, Zane. You are not just a human anymore. You are something more. And with that comes responsibility. But remember this, power is never without its price. Zane nodded, taking a deep breath. The weight of his decision was settling on him, but he wasn't ready to back down. He had chosen this path, and now he had to walk it, no matter the cost. I'm ready, he said, though his voice lacked the confidence he had hoped for. Serafina smiled, her eyes glinting with something dark and knowing. Then let us begin. The days that followed Zane's decision were filled with intense training and preparation. Serafina had made it clear his journey was far from over. The power he had chosen was only the beginning, and now, he had to learn to wield it. Zane spent countless hours in the palace's grand training halls, pushing himself to his limits. His body was changing, adapting to the power that flowed within him. He could feel it in his veins, a constant, pulsing energy that both thrilled and terrified him. The darkness inside him grew stronger with each passing day, and it took all his willpower to keep it under control. Serafina watched from the shadows, never far from him, her eyes always watching, calculating. She didn't need to say much. Her mere presence was enough to drive him forward. "You are doing well," she said one evening, as Zane stood, drenched in sweat, after a particularly grueling session. Her voice was calm, but Zane could sense the weight of her words. "But you still have much to learn. The power you've gained is dangerous. And there are those who will try to take it from you." Zane wiped the sweat from his forehead and nodded. He knew she was right. As much as he wanted to believe he could control the power, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking on a knife's edge. Every moment felt like a test, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep his balance. "What do I do when they come?" he asked, his voice rough. "When these enemies show up, what do I do?" Serafina stepped closer, her eyes dark and unreadable. "You fight. You protect what's yours. You have a place beside me, Zane. But that place is not given freely. It must be earned, through blood and battle." Zane's heart beat faster at her words. He had known that this path would not be easy, but hearing Serafina speak of it so matter-of-factly made it all the more real. This was a battle for survival. It was no longer just about the power he had gained, but about proving himself worthy of standing beside Serafina, of earning her trust, and her affection. And yet, there was a part of him that feared losing himself to the darkness. The power was seductive, and with every passing day, he felt it tugging at him, urging him to give in, to become something more than human. But Serafina had warned him if he lost control, he would become nothing more than a tool for the power he sought to master. He couldn't let that happen. Not now, not when he had come so far. A few nights later, as Zane lay in his chamber, his mind racing with thoughts of the challenges to come, he heard a loud crash from the courtyard. His heart leaped in his chest as he sprang to his feet. The sound was unmistakable, someone was attacking. He rushed out into the courtyard, his body already moving on instinct. When he reached the center, he found Serafina standing tall, facing a group of figures cloaked in dark armor. They were armed with weapons that glowed with an eerie light, and their eyes, like Serafina's, glowed a deep red. Zane's pulse quickened as he realized what was happening. These were the enemies Serafina had warned him about, beings who sought to steal his power. And now, they had come for it. "You've come to challenge me." Serafina's voice was calm, her posture relaxed, yet there was an undeniable strength in her presence. "I suggest you turn back. You are not ready for what awaits you." The leader of the group, a tall figure cloaked in silver, stepped forward. His voice was harsh and cold. "The power you have gained, Serafina, will no longer be yours to control. We have come for it. And we will take it." Zane stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "You'll have to get through me first." Serafina's eyes flicked to him, a small smile playing on her lips. "You've grown bold, human. But remember, this is not just your battle." Zane nodded, feeling the power inside him stir. The darkness, ever present, seemed to come alive as the figures before him raised their weapons. He clenched his fists, his body ready for the fight. He wasn't just going to fight for Serafina's power, he was fighting for himself, for the future he had chosen. The battle began with a blur of motion. Zane moved quickly, using his newfound strength and agility to dodge and strike. Each blow he landed was fueled by the dark power within him, and it felt almost too easy. He could hear the crackling energy in the air as his attacks landed, the sounds of metal clashing against metal ringing in his ears. But even as he fought, he could feel the power inside him threatening to consume him. It was a strange feeling, both thrilling and terrifying. He had to remain focused. If he let the darkness take control, he wouldn't just lose the fight. He would lose himself. Serafina fought with a grace that Zane couldn't help but admire. She moved like a shadow, each strike calculated, each movement precise. The enemies fell before her with ease, but she didn't show any sign of exhaustion. She was a force of nature, a queen, and she fought like one. The leader of the group finally stepped forward, his eyes blazing with fury. He raised his weapon, a dark sword that crackled with energy, and charged at Zane. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Zane could feel the power within him surging, and for a split second, he was afraid that he might lose control. But then, Serafina's voice cut through his mind. "Focus, Zane. Control it." With her words ringing in his ears, Zane steadied himself. He blocked the leader's strike and countered with a powerful blow, sending the enemy flying back. The leader stumbled, clearly stunned by the force of the attack. Zane didn't hesitate. With a swift motion, he disarmed the leader and brought the fight to an end. The courtyard fell silent. The enemies had been defeated, but Zane knew this was only the beginning. There would be more battles, more challenges. And each one would test him in ways he could never predict. Serafina stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You did well, Zane," she said, her voice soft but filled with approval. "But this is just the start. There will be more, and next time, we may not be so lucky." Zane nodded, his heart still racing from the battle. But in that moment, he knew one thing for sure: he was ready for whatever came next. He had chosen this path, and he would walk it to the end, no matter the cost. The night after the battle, Zane stood alone on the balcony of the palace, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. His body still hummed with the power he had used in the fight, but it was not the physical exhaustion that weighed on him, it was the questions that lingered in his mind. The enemies had been defeated for now, but Zane knew that there would always be more. The price of the power he had chosen was steep, and the road ahead was uncertain. He had chosen to stand beside Serafina, to accept her dark world and the power that came with it. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something inside him was changing. The darkness was still there, lingering just beneath the surface, whispering to him. It was the same darkness that had made him feel alive in the heat of battle, the same darkness that had almost overwhelmed him in the fight. Could he control it? Could he stay true to himself, even as the power continued to grow stronger? "You're thinking too much, human," Serafina's voice broke through his thoughts, and Zane turned to see her standing in the doorway behind him. She was dressed in black, her dark hair flowing around her like a cloak. Her eyes gleamed with that same intensity, but there was something softer in her gaze now. Zane smiled faintly. "I can't help it. There's a lot to think about." She walked over to him, her steps silent, and stood beside him at the railing. "You're not the first to be chosen for this path," she said, her voice calm. "And you won't be the last. But you must decide what you want, Zane. Do you want to keep walking this road, knowing that the darkness will always be there, calling to you? Or will you turn away, give it all up, and walk away from me?" Zane's heart skipped a beat at her words. The thought of walking away from Serafina, from everything he had gained, was unbearable. But there was still a part of him that feared losing himself to the power. He had seen what it could do, how it had almost consumed him during the battle. The darkness was seductive, but it was also dangerous. He turned to face her, his gaze steady. "I don't know if I can control it," he said quietly. I've chosen this power, but every day I feel like I'm losing a little bit of myself. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep it under control. Serafina reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch cold but grounding. You will learn to control it, Zane. It's not about resisting the darkness, it's about embracing it. Understanding it. Using it to your advantage. Zane looked at her, his mind racing. But at what cost? The cost is always there, Serafina said softly. Nothing comes without sacrifice. The question is, are you willing to pay the price? Zane thought about the battles he had fought, the power he had gained, and the price he had already paid. He had given up his humanity, in a way. He had become something more, something different. But he hadn't lost himself, not yet. And he wasn't ready to. I'm not ready to lose myself, he said firmly. I may not have all the answers, but I'm not going to let the darkness take over. I'll fight to keep who I am. Serafina's expression softened, and for a moment, she almost looked proud. Good, she said. That's the answer I was hoping for. The power you've chosen will always be with you, Zane. But it doesn't have to define you. You define it? Zane nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. The uncertainty was still there, but he felt stronger, more certain than he had before. He had made his choice, and he was ready to stand by it. The darkness was a part of him now, but it wouldn't control him. He would control it. Serafina stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. I knew you were different, she said softly. That's why I chose you. Zane's heart fluttered at her words. You chose me. She nodded. You are not like the others. You have strength, Zane, not just in your body, but in your will. That's what I need by my side. Zane felt a surge of something inside him, something that was more than just power. It was a connection, something deeper than he had ever felt before. He wasn't just a pawn in Serafina's game. He was a partner. And together, they would stand against whatever challenges the galaxy threw at them. I'm with you, he said, his voice steady. I've chosen this path. And I'll walk it with you, no matter where it leads. Serafina smiled, the expression genuine and soft. For the first time since they had met, Zane saw the woman behind the queen, the one who had been alone for so long. And he understood then that their connection was more than just power. It was something real, something that neither of them could deny. I'm glad, she said, her voice warm. Because this is just the beginning. Together, we will rule this galaxy, Zane. And nothing will stand in our way. Zane looked out at the stars, his heart swelling with a mix of excitement and determination. He had chosen this path, and now, he would walk it with Serafina by his side. Whatever the future held, he knew one thing for certain: they would face it together.